more damage in 10 years than any country did in the first 50 years of the nuclear age, according to James Walsh, executive director of Harvard's Managing the Atom Project. Washington's aggressive militarism is not the only factor driving the race to apocalypse soon, but it is surely a significant one. The plans and policies fall within a much broader context, with roots going back to the Clinton years and beyond. All of this is at the fringe of public discourse, and does not enter even marginally into electoral choices, another illustration of the decline of functioning democracy and its portent. The only threat remotely comparable to use of nuclear weapons is the serious danger of environmental catastrophe. In preparation for the July 2005 Group of 8 summit in Gleneagles, Scotland, the scientific academies of all G8 nations, including the U.S. National Academy of Sciences, joined those of China, India, and Brazil to call on the leaders of the rich countries to take urgent action to head off this potential disaster. The scientific understanding of climate change is now sufficiently clear to justify prompt action, their statement said. It is vital that all nations identify cost-effective steps that they can take now to contribute to substantial and long-term reduction in net global greenhouse gas emissions. In its lead editorial, the Financial Times endorsed this clarion call, while deploring the fact that there is, however, one holdout, and unfortunately it is to be found in the White House, where, in spite of the unprecedented statement by the G8 scientists ahead of next month's Gleneagles summit, George W. Bush, the U.S. President, insists we still do not know enough about this literally world-changing phenomenon. Washington then succeeded in removing language calling for prompt action to control global warming, and eliminating such inflammatory statements as, "Our world is warming," because Mr. Bush has said global warming is too uncertain a matter to justify anything more than voluntary measures. The end result, the Financial Times editor's comment, is that little remained beyond pious waffle. Dismissal of scientific evidence on matters of survival, in keeping with Bush's scientific judgment, is routine. At the 2005 annual meeting of the American Association for the Advancement of Science, leading U.S. climate researchers released the most compelling evidence yet that human activities are responsible for global warming. The group predicted major climatic effects, including severe reduction in water supplies in regions that rely on rivers fed by melting snow and glaciers. Other prominent researchers at the same session reported evidence that the melting of Arctic and Greenland ice sheets is causing changes in the sea's salinity balance that threaten to shut down the ocean conveyor belt, which transfers heat from the tropics towards the polar regions through currents such as the Gulf Stream. One possible consequence is significant temperature reduction in Europe. Not long after, climate experts reported further shrinking of the polar ice cap, and warned that the long-predicted feedbacks in the system are starting to take hold, as the enlarged expanses of open water absorb solar energy instead of reflecting it back to space, hence accelerating the severe threat of global warming. The release of the most compelling evidence yet, like the G8 warnings, received scant notice in the United States, despite the attention given in the same days to the implementation of the Kyoto Protocols regulating greenhouse emissions, with the most important government refusing to take part. It is important to stress government. The standard observation that the United States stood almost alone in rejecting the Kyoto Protocols is correct only if the phrase United States excludes its population, which strongly favors the Kyoto Pact. A majority of Bush backers not only support the protocol, but mistakenly believe that the president does so as well. In general, voters in the 2004 election were seriously deluded about the positions of the political parties, not because of lack of interest or mental capacity, but because elections are carefully designed to yield that result, a topic to which we will return. Iraq and the War on Terror. U.S. and U.K. planners were well aware that the invasion of Iraq was likely to increase terror and WMD proliferation, as many analysts and intelligence agencies warned. CIA Director George Tenet informed Congress in October 2002 that invading Iraq might lead Saddam Hussein to assist Islamist terrorists in conducting a WMD attack against the United States. The National Intelligence Council predicted that an American-led invasion of Iraq would increase support for political Islam and would result in a deeply divided Iraqi society prone to violent internal conflict, hence engendering terror within Iraq and worldwide. The NIC confirmed these expectations in December 2004, reporting that Iraq and other possible conflicts in the future could provide recruitment, training grounds, technical skills, and language proficiency for a new class of terrorists who are professionalized and for whom political violence becomes an end in itself. The NIC also predicted that as a result of the invasion, this new globalized network of diffuse Islamic extremist groups would spread its operations elsewhere to defend Muslim lands from attack by infidel invaders, with Iraq replacing Afghanistan as a training ground. A CIA report of May 2005 confirmed that Iraq has become a magnet for Islamic militants, similar to Soviet-occupied Afghanistan 2 decades ago and Bosnia in the 1990s. The CIA concluded that Iraq may prove to be an even more effective training ground for Islamic extremists than Afghanistan was in al-Qaeda's early days, because it is serving as a real-world laboratory for urban combat. 2 years after the invasion, a high-level government review of the War on Terror affirmed the same conclusion. Focusing on how to deal with the rise of a new generation of terrorists schooled in Iraq over the past couple years, the review noted, top government officials are increasingly turning their attention to anticipate what one called the bleed-out of hundreds or thousands of Iraq-trained jihadists back to their home countries throughout the Middle East and Western Europe. It's a new piece of a new equation, a former senior Bush administration official said. If you don't know who they are in Iraq, how are you going to locate them in Istanbul or London? There is little doubt that the invasion of Iraq had the effect of greatly strengthening the popular appeal of anti-democratic radicals such as those of al-Qaeda and other jihadi Salafis throughout the Muslim world. A crucial illustration is Indonesia, a state with the world's largest Muslim population and a likely source of jihadi terror. In 2000, 75% of Indonesians viewed Americans favorably. This number fell to 61% by 2002 and plummeted to 15% after the invasion of Iraq, with 80% of Indonesians saying they feared an attack by the United States. Scott Atran, a specialist on terror and Indonesia, reports that these sentiments correlate with readiness by over 80% of Indonesians to have Islam play an increasing role in personal and national life, but are also associated with tolerance for a broader spectrum of co-religionists, including militant radicals, and readiness to amplify any slight against an Islamic leader or nation into a perceived attack upon the whole Muslim world. The threat is not abstract. Shortly after the deadly bomb attacks on London's public transportation system in July 2005, Britain's Royal Institute of International Affairs, Chatham House, released a study reiterating the standard conclusions of intelligence agencies and independent analysts. There is no doubt that the invasion of Iraq has given a boost to the al-Qaeda network in propaganda, recruitment, and fundraising, while providing an ideal training area for terrorists. The study found that the UK is at particular risk because it is the closest ally of the United States, has deployed armed forces in the military campaigns to topple the Taliban